our focus on today's session is, are you ready to win with GenAI? It's the number one business priority in the world in 2025. Lots of complexity on what to solve, in what order, how do we deliver a real bottom line impact to the organization. So we're going to start with a discussion of what the opportunity and challenges are. We'll drill into how you can assess your GenAI readiness, including a quick high-level survey. Excuse me. And then we'll talk about accelerating your readiness and really accelerating your impact with GenAI. So this is about the only way you would have avoided all the buzz around GenAI in 2025. It's been everywhere. It's in airports. It's on commercials and football games. You really can't escape it. The real reason, or the real question is why, right? And the answer is GenAI offers tremendous opportunities to organizations that successfully leverage it within their business to accelerate growth, deliver awesome customer experiences, and solve some of the customer experience challenges that we've had for decades around omni-channel experience and true personalized marketing and engagement. 3, it offers a really compelling opportunity to drive op margin or operating margin improvements. And 4th, it's a key workforce productivity enabler. This is where most people have experienced GenAI initially in their own kind of personal use, but it's really a significant benefit. And I always enjoy this quote: "Look, the future's here. It's just unevenly distributed." So organizations that have successfully solved their underlying capabilities and have invested in their AI engineers are already seeing significant bottom line impact to the organization. Most organizations are still pretty early in their journey. The reality is most of these efforts have lagged a little bit of the initial hype, right? So most folks, or a lot of folks, are familiar with the MIT survey that talked about 95% of organizations are yet to see a bottom line impact or return from the GenAI efforts. BCG had a really good data point around fewer than a quarter of organizations have moved beyond the proof of concept stage. And McKinsey is seeing similar data where more than 80% of organizations that have active GenAI programs in place, more than 80% of them have yet to see real bottom line impact. So the question, kind of trillion-dollar question, if you believe a lot of the analysts, is why have companies struggled to realize GenAI's promised benefits? And the answer to that is both simple and admittedly fairly complex, in that there are just a wide range of underlying capability and readiness gaps, right? It starts with data. There's a lot of very few organizations have a really deep bench of AI and GenAI engineers. Enterprise orchestration is non-trivial. How do we take natural language user requests, route them to first understand what they're looking for, and then route them to the different information sources and tools across our environment, pull all that back into a high quality response for a client? Turns out that's a lot of work, and it's fairly complex. Secure AI is a big focus for most organizations, and also an area where there's a lot of questions. And last but not least, we're seeing the implications of gaps in the integrated strategy across, to be fair, most organizations that we work with. And the thing to walk away from when we think about this topic in particular, these are 5 really prominent, kind of systemic gaps that we see with organizations around the world. There are a lot more that are in scope. These are just the 5 that we chose to highlight today.
Hey, Jason, there's a question from the crowd.
Yeah.
Which of these mind the gap areas has been most critical for our clients so far? Or have they been equally distributed?
It's a great question. I think I would my answer is a little nuanced. I think the answer is all of them. I think the answer is, but the kind of one click down is the awareness of the implications of each of these differ by client. All right, so every client, we just wrote a blog yesterday. We just published a blog that said, look, like, forget about it. Your data is not ready. It's not ready for AI. Unless maybe you're Google, maybe we'd say their data is really, really mature, but I suspect if you looked closely enough, they have challenges. So look, your data isn't ready, your talent isn't ready, and your agents almost definitely aren't ready for prime time. So each of these gaps exist in every client that we've worked with. They kind of exist to differing degrees. There are a couple of clients that we've worked with that are pretty good, are pretty mature around secure AI, right? There are a couple of groups that are pretty forward leaning in their data readiness, although still have quite a lot of work to do. Integrated strategy around adopting and scaling AI is really in short supply. So I would tend to point to the integrated strategy simply because that's what ties all of these different areas of focus together and drives clarity around how we're going to solve for them. But awesome question. Other questions around gaps, because this is really kind of at the heart of why so many organizations have struggled up to this point.
Jason, one other question. Have your work with clients borne out that the same abysmal success rate that MIT was reporting?
There's some measurement challenges in the study. And so when you look a little closer, you realize that the question that was actually asked is, what percentage or have you seen measurable impact from your Gen AI efforts? So there's a little bit of a question around, is it that their solutions aren't working at all, or is it they have gaps in measurement, right? And so there's a little bit of a duality to that question that's a little challenging. What we're seeing is all of our clients are struggling to move as quickly as they would like to. We've worked with a number of early adopters, so a lot of our clients actually do have solutions up and running in production. Several of them are revenue generating, but universally they're struggling to achieve the results that they were looking for. And to be honest, there's a lot of band-aiding going on behind the scenes. One example is an organization that we did just a small amount of work with. They're in the healthcare space. They are they're being very specific around if you get this type of question, here's the answer that you should provide. All right, so they are using natural language understanding on the front end to interpret a wider range of requests, but they're not generating custom responses in real time to those questions because they've not been able to solve the quality problem and their data is not quite ready. So it's a little bit of a nuanced answer to the question, but bottom line is if 95% haven't seen bottom line impact, 99.9% aren't moving as fast as they want to.
Okay. And one comment, when leaders say that they're doing AI, shouldn't they really be focused on what business problems they're solving or value they're creating?
That's a great question. That's a great comment. Yes. Yeah. And that question of not only what customer problem are they solving, what organizational problem are they solving, how are they enabling their team members, but that connection to, and how does that translate to meaningful value for the business is an area where almost every organization has some opportunities around. So let's dig into how we assess or how you might approach assessing your Gen AI readiness. There's a lot of moving parts here. It's more than just a little complex. So having a really structured, deliberate, kind of method to identify where you're ready, where you're not, and what you need to do about it is super important. So at the heart of our approach is the keys to winning. with GenAI. This gives leaders a really clear mental model of what they need to solve for at each level as they work through their adoption and scaling efforts. So first, you really need a very clear vision for the role that GenAI should play in your business model, right? Are you going to monetize these capabilities? Are you going to focus on customer experience challenges? Is this primarily a margin play? And in what order? Next, because there's a lot of complexity to solve for, you really need an integrated strategy and plan. And this is one area where we talk, we'll use the phrase, you need to be playing chess, not checkers in this area, because if you're solving one problem at a time around AI adoption, you're going to be at it for a very, very long time. You may be at looking at a 5 to 7 year time to value and not even know it. So you need both an integrated strategy and a way to parallelize your work to move faster. Next, look, the middle layer of the keys to winning is what everyone is looking for. They're looking for high impact Gen AI solutions that are awesome, that the clients love, that their employees use every day, and that deliver real impact to the business. The reality is, in order to deliver those solutions, there are a whole bunch of organizational capabilities that they're dependent on, right? Whether that's data, whether it's natural language understanding, agentic workflows are becoming more and more important, guardrails to do so responsibly. There's a lot of kind of different pieces to the puzzle that need to come together. So understanding what those are and what role they play is critical. And then last but not least, really understanding where this stuff is working in your organization and environment, where it's not, and what you need to do to move faster. Super important. So let's talk about each, right? Your GenAI vision needs to, there's going to be hundreds or even thousands of decisions your organization is going to make as you work to adopt and scale GenAI. And your vision should really serve as a very clear North Star that as you're pivoting and as you're working through the complexity, everyone is pointing in the same direction in a strategically meaningful way. When we talk about integrated strategy, similar, but your strategy needs to drive first focus. This is the number one problem we see in the organizations that we work with, is there's so many different things that GenAI could do for your business. We see dozens or even hundreds of ideas being pursued. Hackathons provide a lot of energy on the front end, but they can contribute to this challenge of, gosh, there's so many different, it's an opportunity-rich environment that we spread everyone quite thin, and the few experts that you have quickly get saturated and a little bit overwhelmed. So your strategy should drive focus. It should drive clarity on what's most important and what needs to be solved. And then we need to be moving forward in an aligned way on this topic. Next, as we think about products, the goal is pretty simple, right? To deliver meaningful value to the business, you're going to have to ship working software much faster than we've been able to do to date. And there's a lot that goes into that. There's understanding what your customers want. There's being able to test and validate technical feasibility early, so you're not wasting quarters on solutions you're technically not ready to solve. There's a whole bunch of just nuts and bolts technical solutioning expertise that your teams need to develop. There's also, once you develop awesome solutions, there's some real barriers to entry or barriers to adoption for a lot of your clients, right? Whether that's a security review, whether it's compliance or policy issues, or it's just folks being a little leery of AI solutions. You need to, once you create high quality solutions, you need to be really deliberate around how you accelerate their adoption. And then that question of, how do I evolve these capabilities? Do I introduce the next feature? Do I solve a performance or a quality problem? Or do I focus on a little value engineering because these solutions can get a little expensive? There's a lot that goes into managing and developing and supporting these solutions. we talk a lot about capabilities, and we'll touch on these in a fair amount of detail. Uh, at the end of the day, if you don't have the required capabilities across the company, you're going to get stuck. And this is what we're seeing, everywhere. You're going to see very little real production level progress across your solution portfolio. And we'll dig into this topic in a little more detail in just a moment. The last layer is also just as important. Um, that question of, do you have the actionable Gen AI insights to know what's going well, what's not quite working, where you may need to pivot, where you need to lean in and take a slightly different approach, or you may be able to, or you may need to rethink how you're doing things altogether. Insights, particularly as we move to semi-autonomous and then autonomous AI capabilities. Real-time insights they're not a nice to have, they're really non-negotiable moving forward.
Hey, Jason, we have a question from the crowd
Oh,
that I think will flow nicely here. Where should ownership of Gen AI reside? Is it at the corporate or the IT or a business unit or maybe a special purpose cross-functional team?
yeah, it's a really good question. And I think the answer depends on at what level you're looking at it. Ultimately, this is a business model discussion, so I think it's got to be a cross-functional decision as a leadership team, and the board needs to be engaged around it as well. When you talk about AI strategy, there's a lot of different places that it can sit. Right? It might sit in an operations area, it could sit in tech, it could sit in a special AI group itself. But the really important kind of implication to this is ultimately it needs to be owned by each of the business groups and the corporate functions themselves, right? With a layer underneath it that provides services to each. So your primary, let's say you've got 5 business lines, each of them needs to have a really clear perspective and POV on how they're going to leverage AI to market to customers, how they're going to use it to accelerate sales funnels, its role in product development, its role in ongoing customer success, and how they enable their folks. So I think initially what we see is there's a centralized enablement organization. We like to call it the Gen AI Accelerator that helps embed these capabilities and kind of accelerate the learning curve on the front end. And their role often is to shape strategy early. Then, as quickly as possible, you want to identify the group that really owns either the business strategy or the functional enablement, and really make sure that they have what they need to own the strategy at that level. There's then a group that looks at, okay, we've got misalignments or we've got some gaps in our strategy, we need to go after them. That function can sit in a lot of different places. I think the more important reality is it just needs to be clear, and it needs to kind of cross the different areas of your business effectively. Good question. As we look at this a little closer, let's see what your guys' perspectives are on this. If you could grab your phone and let's take a quick mini survey ourselves. If you could scan the QR, and we'll do a quick little assessment as a group. And I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second because I want to, well, actually, let me give you a second to scan the QR code. Pull your phone out. And then I'm going to switch over to our online assessment platform. Give you 5 more seconds. And then I'm going to stop sharing. All right. Let me pull that over. Actually, I don't have to stop sharing. That's good. All right. So first question, where is your organization around your Gen AI vision? Do you have a clear and compelling vision? Like, everybody's waking up in the morning, making their way to either to their office or to the desk, thinking about how we move Gen AI forward? Or, are you not sure what the organization's vision is in general? Or you're pretty sure you don't have one, right? We got 5 participants. I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to respond.
Are folks having trouble with the QR code?
All right, so we've got 8 responses. The nice thing is they're pretty, they're fairly clearly grouped into the not sure or disagree range of responses, which is kind of typical of what we see these days. We'll often don't see a lot of folks saying they strongly disagree because they're kind of wrapping their head around what a vision might look like. But that, like, if you're not sure, what the vision is or how effective it is, that's almost as important as disagree. Now, what this means is the organization, as you work to solve something super complex, folks aren't exactly clear on the path forward, and then what the priorities are and how it all fits together. So this is an area that when we see this type of result with a client, we'll just carve out a couple of hours, and we typically finalize an organization's vision in as little as 60 minutes. We've always completed it in less than 2 hours, and it makes a huge difference moving forward. Why don't we take a look at your organizational GenAI strategy? So, question: our strategy and plan position us to win with GenAI. Strongly agree, disagree? Yeah, what you got? Like, I have a pretty clear perspective on this, but it'll be interesting to see how other folks, what your experience is across this. Got some disagrees, we got some strongly agrees. We've got a couple of not sures. That's fair. So I'll give you just one more second. Yeah, we had 9 responses last time. So yeah, this is also what we typically see. And this is tough because organizations are trying to figure this out as they go. And so really creating a coherent, integrated strategy is really actually quite challenging on the front end of this, particularly as best practices are still norming. But the reality is, those design patterns that are working are becoming clearer all the time. And it's really the gaps in strategy, either across the organization as your strategy is interpreted, or it's at different levels of the organization as it's decomposed from high-level strategy down to actionable plans. It's those gaps where strategy and complex transformation fails, right? Or really struggles to deliver the results that you're looking for. So if with a client, if we see that this is not sure, strongly disagree around their AI strategy and Gen AI strategy, it's simple to solve. We typically take 2 weeks, maybe 3, work through a really structured Gen AI enabled process. And at the end of that, our clients walk away with a very clear strategy of what's important, what their keys to winning are, how they're going to structure their work, what initiatives they need, what quick wins they're going to prioritize. And I saw there was a question around, I think there was a question around quick wins, or actually there's a question around the easy button in the chat. Let me touch on that in 1 second. So we'll walk away with a very actionable plan and clear strategy across the business. I like the question about the easy button that I touched on in the article that I published yesterday. We're still seeing a lot of bottoms-up approaches to Gen AI in business today, which is, hey, this stuff is awesome. The secret here is to give our technologists access to the APIs and start having them bang away on some LLMs and figuring out what this stuff can do. And that was great in 2023. It was okay in 2024. In 2025, it's not working. All right. What we've discovered and what's become very, very clear across the industry is the amount of complexity and the interdependencies across these different capabilities means you need a clearer, more deliberate strategy, right? So as individuals, play with this stuff, they can prototype really quickly, but when they try to productize these solutions, they quickly run into those organizational readiness gaps and get stuck, right? So if your organization is in a place where you're not sure if you have a great strategy, and even more importantly, if you don't have a good really effective integrated strategy and plan, then that should be a priority in Q4 and certainly early in Q1 in 2026. Without solving this, you're going to really struggle to move at pace.
Jason, we actually had a question on point from Clive about
Yeah.
strategy integration. How does a CTO or CIO guard against shadow IT, where various groups in the org spin up their own pilots and start?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, it's great to see you, Clive. It's really unclear right now how to get in front of that. There's two different kind of perspectives. One is a lot of organizations actually welcomed it early because it gave folks an opportunity to experiment with these solutions, play with some low code solutions, and kind of start working up the learning curve. The challenge is we've all seen this play before, and as the saying goes, it didn't end well for Mr. Lincoln. Uh, the shadow IT is a problem because when you provide these capabilities and technologies to folks who don't think like developers, they don't build quality checks, they aren't thinking about security, they aren't clear on what type of data they need. You end up creating a tremendous amount of operational noise in the organization, a lot of risk associated with that, and maybe a little less obvious at first, but you end up driving a lot of cost in your system. There's a partner that we're just beginning to go to market with that is a solution called Magic Mirror. And you can bring it into your organization and it will show you all the different sources of AI use in your environment, whether that's in labs, it's embedded in third-party products, or if it's within custom full stack solutions. For me, that's one of the coolest opportunities that I've seen or solutions to really map all those different sources of shadow IT in your organization and step back and say, okay, some of these we're fine with, like individual productivity tools, especially if they're not expensive or we have enterprise agreements for. Some of those tools we're probably not okay with because they're expensive and they create quality problems. Then there's a whole category of things that we're going to have to shut down right away because they represent security and responsible AI problems for the company. So it's a great question. It's something that every company is wrestling with right now. The good news is, there are more programmatic solutions being developed all the time.
Cool.
Any other questions on the strategy side before we move to capabilities?
Nope.
All right. Let's see I'm sorry, the next one is products. So how consistently does your organization or does your group turn promising ideas into high impact GenAI solutions? Is this I think about it, over breakfast and by noon I've got something up and running, in production? Is this, hey, we're not sure where we are, from that perspective? Is it we're really struggling to we turn early stage prototypes into solutions that we can scale? All right. This is ultimately the way that value is delivered to the business. And I love the fact that the majority of the responses is not sure, right? That's very telling today because, most organizations are rolling out the 2 or 3 examples of where they've implemented something. There's a lot of dog and ponying going on in organizations, and it's a little bit tough sometimes to cut through the messaging and the demos that look really cool to really understand what is being impactful in production. But the reality is I'm not seeing any strongly agrees here, and that's certainly what we're seeing across our client base. Lots of prototypes, really interesting demos, stuff that looks great in a hackathon. Very few of them making their way to production. There are a couple of notable exceptions with clients that we're working with, though. All
Jason,
right,
we got an interesting data readiness question. Do you want to address that now or wait until we get to capabilities?
let's do it now. Yeah.
Okay. Al asked, hey, Gen AI is awesome, but it's pretty dependent on the accuracy of the data sets. And I think that that's a big issue, having confidence in the truth in data.
Yeah, man, it's funny. It's good to see you, Al. This is the number one, Achilles heel of Gen AI efforts. We've been talking about data quality for decades. MDM's been around a long time. The reality is, there's a lot of messy data out there. The problem is, or the challenge is, AI, and more specifically generative AI, raises the bar or has a higher bar in terms of data readiness. So we're used to talking about data quality. Is your data accurate? Is it timely? Is it complete? Uh, is it reliable? Those type of traditional measures of data quality, those all are relevant in an AI world. The challenge in a Gen AI world, though, is you need much more. You need, complete, very clear metadata around your data. Your data needs to be discoverable at a machine level, wherever it exists in your environment. It needs to be understandable, and that's more challenging. It needs to be understandable not just from a labeling perspective, but from a semantic context perspective. It needs to be accessible. All right, so you need to solve for entitlements. You need to solve for latency. The hardest part is ideally it's connectable across your different data domains. So your customer support data references your customers and products the same way as your product data sets, as does your billing, right? When customers come in and ask questions across those different sources, it's very important that your data is structured the same way and is really connectable. And that's the area that most of our clients have a long way to go. Finally, it needs to be highly observable. So organizations are moving to how can we understand and how do we have really good transparency into the full life cycle of our data, from the point of creation, ingestion, modeling, enrichment, through potentially transformation through AI or ML models, all the way to the point where an LLM generates a response. Ideally, you need to be able to provide traceability across the life cycle of the data, and it needs to be auditable. Right now, that's kind of a nice to have in most geographies. The regulation is being developed today where that's going to be less discretionary moving forward. So a big challenge that every organization that we're working with is I think that's the next big transformation for most companies. Why don't we use that as a segue to the capability discussion? Because ultimately, data readiness is an organizational capability discussion. And it's to be honest, it's the largest focus for our practice. So when we look at this, do we have the organizational capabilities to successfully adopt and scale Gen AI across our business? That starts with secure AI and responsible AI and integrated and technical change management, CI/CD in an ML AI world, integrated governance. It moves to data, model selection, evaluation, driven development as a service, UX design. There's a bunch of things around talent enablement, brand building, if you're looking to monetize these solutions. There are also advanced capabilities like knowledge graphs. I had a really interesting discussion with one of the leading knowledge graph thought leaders in Australia yesterday. So it's interesting to see how those different capabilities are being used in some really advanced use cases. So look, this is exactly what I would expect to see. I think what we often see when we engage leaders is the first assessment they take, they say, yes, we absolutely have the organizational capabilities to win, and we're going to dominate, we're going to crush this. Then we go through and work with them, and they'll take it again like next quarter, and it's like, no, we're like totally not ready. And we have like rampant gaps or systemic gaps in capabilities. The first part of that journey is really understanding what capabilities are needed. Because once you understand that, we can break it down and build a very clear map for you. But getting leaders engaged around what are the different pieces that are needed, what does good look like, and then commitment to closing gaps. That's the most important part. Questions or thoughts around organizational capabilities in the Gen AI space, because this is a pretty rich area.
We did get one question, actually a couple, on how to link your capability gaps back to strategy, and should you use OKRs or should you treat capabilities as a separate track, and where should you start?
Yeah, no, that's really good. When we frame out as a Gen AI adoption and scaling strategy, one of the work streams tends to be capability enablement. It will either be one work stream or it will fall across multiple work streams. So if we have a talent work stream, if we've got a data work stream, if we've got a secure and responsible AI work stream, each of those has a capability dimension to it. So we'll typically embed a readiness OKR in each of those work streams where a capability is at the heart of what we're solving for. And so the capability OKR, the readiness OKR, is a really good leading indicator around, are we going to be successful in that space? So we'll focus on readiness, maturity, and capability gap closures on the front end. And then we'll look at the impact measures of, all right, we provided training to our folks, they attended it. Ultimately, did they have the skills to go produce really high quality Gen AI solutions? Or are they using our solutions effectively if they're non-developers but are leveraging these capabilities? So on the front end, being really clear where those capability gaps exist. B, how you measure them and assess. We use assessments to do so. And then including them as part of the measures of success for each of your work streams is generally the approach we've seen work most effectively. All right, last but not by no means least, let's talk about insights. We have the data and insights we need to customize our Gen AI journey and maximize our impact. So where are each of your organizations around really good and effective integrated insights? We won't even go to real time. This doesn't have to be real time, but it's got to be effective. So when we talk about integrated insights, what we're really thinking is, do you understand where you're making money if this is customer facing? Where you're seeing margin improvements, where that's translating to productivity improvement that you can actually measure. Are you clear what your customer experience is along that journey as you're experimenting? We always recommend experimenting internally with your employee base before you expose these solutions to clients. Then, are you executing your Gen AI strategy effectively as a set of OKRs? Are you managing your risks as a set of key risk indicators or KRIs? Is your data ready? Is your talent ready? And we're big fans of evaluation-driven development because it gives you really clear insights in terms of how you're AI programs or systems are performing at a very detailed level. So do you understand how your Gen AI solutions are performing at any given time? We haven't interacted with a customer who's fully solved this yet, but several of our customers are pretty far along the journey in this space, and they all comment on this is a game changer. When you get better insights, especially with really complex AI systems, then then you can take action. Otherwise, you're kind of trying to guess and making a lot of assumptions around what's working, what's not, and what you should prioritize. All right, so thank you for participating and that's in the survey. It was good to see that our clients aren't alone. I think most organizations are in a similar place as they're working to adopt Gen AI. So let me go back into our deck. All right, so we talked about assessing readiness. Ultimately, like it's good to have a measure of where you are today, but you're going to really annoy your leaders if you just say, hey, we're not ready here, we're not ready here, we're not ready there. Ultimately, what they want to talk about is moving faster, going bigger, and delivering more value across your AI efforts. So I touched on this earlier, but in terms of a journey to accelerate your readiness, number one, you and your leaders need to start by understanding what good looks like. You need to have a clear mental model of what an effective vision looks like. How do we, what priorities are we defining? Are we engaging our different stakeholders, and are we evolving our vision over time? Two, what does a good strategy look like in this space? What does an effective strategy look like? What are our keys to winning in each of our areas? Are we delivering some quick wins, and are we delivering meaningful impact to the business? Is our acceleration plan slash roadmap positioning us to move at pace? And can we optimize our strategy really on a quarterly basis? Then from a product perspective, can we take promising ideas and turn them into high impact solutions on a consistent basis? Do we have the capabilities we need to do or to do so consistently? And then do we have the insights leaders are looking for to answer tough questions? Two, align on what your current state is versus target state. And this can be a little challenging. One of the reasons that we often recommend bringing in a third party for that discussion is we can kind of nudge a little bit. When I watch internal folks push this discussion, sometimes, or maybe more than sometimes, they're often a little reluctant to push too hard on a really candid discussion about this. But it's absolutely critical to be, very frank and transparent around both where you need to be, more importantly, where you are today, and then we can rally around what we need to do about it. Three, you got to commit to action. All right. So whether it's data, whether it's talent, whether it's orchestration, you need to pick one, maybe pick two, but not pick all five. And then put an actual plan to a set of plans together, measurable, time bound, and you need to be able to see progress across these. Ideally, at least every month, and maybe even faster. Four, you've got to close key gaps, right? And as we look at delivering some quick wins to make this real for folks, start with a benefits knowledge assistant. As you close your gaps, you're able to deliver meaningful solutions. It could be a sales co-pilot. One of the solutions we like a lot that we've been implementing is a time to value accelerator for new hires. Right, so you take all the standard operating procedures in your organization, create a little bit of a virtual twin for new hires, and give them someone to ask questions to. Hey, where would I find this information? What's the best practice if someone asks me a question? How should I answer? Where can I find FAQ docs around a particular topic? Gen AI solutions are an awesome fit for those types of kind of information and generally repeatable processes. Last but not least is, we're here, really talking about our assessments for a reason. We've spent a year building out what we believe is the most robust integrated GenAI assessment framework in the world. So we have one survey, you just took it, around the keys to winning. We have a similar one for your vision. We also have a detailed diagnostic for visions. We have a very simple strategy survey and a pretty simple strategy assessment. The details below it are complex, but the assessment's actually really simple. Next, we've got a whole bunch of product surveys and assessments. We actually have one product survey. We have 23 detailed diagnostics. And that's because very quickly, when you get into the technical side of this, what good looks like for enterprise semantic search is very specific. What problems you need to solve for natural language understanding, for tool calling, for responsible AI at the individual product level, it's very specific. And so we have a diagnostic solution for each one of those capabilities. We touched on organizational capabilities, and actually at the product level, we usually refer to them as competencies. One level down are organizational capabilities, and there are 20 at a high level. There's integrated governance, there's foundational capabilities, there's scaling capabilities, and then a series of advanced capabilities. Not every organization is playing with those advanced capabilities like knowledge graphs and hyper-personalization. But I promise you, if you're serious about it, you will be kind of playing in those spaces over the next couple of years. And finally, on the kind of structured assessment and diagnostic, we have one insight survey and a detailed assessment. We're in the process. These are kind of we're work in progress. We're developing a whole set of role-specific assessments. There's over 30 of them. No big deal for an individual. They'll take one, right? But for a product manager, we have a specific assessment for business analysts. We have an assessment for each type of enterprise architect in the space. So the thing that's really important there is to get very specific around what capabilities and competencies each role needs, where they are today, and then build an actionable plan to close that gap as quickly as possible. Every organization in the world is trying to figure out how to develop full stack AI engineers and Gen AI engineers. The role assessments are really at the heart of how to do that quickly. This all contributes to our core promise to our customers, which is really twice the AI value in half the time, right? There's a lot of complexity. Most organizations are struggling. On the front end of this, the keys to winning provides your mental model. The diagnostic framework lets you start small in manageable increments, understand where you have major gaps that are going to impact or impede your ability to deliver value with AI, and then progressively go deeper as you're ready. So I think that's the end of the deck content that we have today.
We did have one other question. Pat was asking if you have a whole bunch of different business units involved, how do you manage scope? The North Star may be interpreted.
Yeah. So, the answer is you want that. You actually, as an organization, your ability to move at pace across the organization is, the objective. What you need to get really clear about is where each group is in their journey, what their priorities are. So one group may be prioritizing internal workforce productivity. Your business unit may be prioritizing market-facing functionality. So each of those groups is going to have a bit of a different journey, certainly a different set of enablement priorities. So that's why the integrated strategy is so important, right? You want to look across that and have work streams for your business units, for your corporate functions, be very clear around what they're working to solve. And I touched on it a little earlier. We often use, the term, what are your keys to winning? right? So vision, strategy, capabilities. You'll also hear me use the term cascading keys to winning, and that confuses people oftentimes. So I've learned to pause and be a little clearer about that. But your cascading keys to winning at the top of the house might start with, hey, we want to make $100 million of Gen AI enabled revenue in the next 24 months. Decomposing that across your different business units, each of your business units will likely have a target revenue or a revenue goal. So then you break that down and say, okay, to achieve, $10 million in business unit A and 20 million in business unit B, what are we going to need to do from a product perspective? And kind of break that down as you decompose the strategy, getting really clear, ideally through a set of OKRs, and then very clear roadmaps and plans. Orchestrating progress across the different business units and corporate functions, to be honest, is probably the hardest part of the Gen AI, adoption and scaling process. But it's it's what's going to be the differentiator for organizations that really, see a lot of benefits from this, and organizations that struggle. A group that we've been working with on our messaging said this really well. Your ability to do what we just talked about, like embed, parallelize the work, orchestrate it, is really going to be it's going to determine who wins and who struggles from an organizational perspective, literally for the next decade. So, great question. We see this as the number one challenge. And it's also why we recommend having a centralized accelerator group that on the front end kind of shepherds this process and orchestrates it. And then on an ongoing basis, looks across the different groups, and and where the groups are struggling, they'll engage and help them kind of get unstuck. Any other questions? I know we're almost at the hour, but I'm happy to field any questions that anyone might have. Why don't we wrap? Because we've got 3 minutes to 1. What I would throw out there is probably get a sense we're pretty passionate on this topic. We've invested years solving this. We're just beginning to really scale in the market. So if as an organization you have some needs in this space, please feel free to reach out to us. If there are other folks that who are trying to crack the code on this, point them our way as well. We're looking to build our portfolio of clients. Our solutions are fairly lightweight and easy to kind of see progress quickly. And then, we tend to scale out from there. So A, appreciate your time today. B, appreciate your focus. And C, let us know how we can help.